with Jonathan Ritchie's we're St. Petersburg, Florida.
In front of Allendale United Methodist Church.
Do you think America's best days are behind her or still ahead of her?
Still ahead of us. I think bad things happen are a blessing in disguise. And I think it's meant to be. We're in God's hands. And what just happened in 2020, I don't like to use the word woke, but awakened. Awaken the Patriots. We see the evilness of what they do. We will never make the mistakes again. And I believe this country, the best is yet to come.
Aiden.
Aiden, where do you live, Aiden?
I'm in Frederick, Maryland.
Frederick, Maryland. And you're here at Hagerstown. What's the name of the...
This is the Hagerstown Speedway.
Okay. And what are you doing here today?
Well, I'm helping in the kitchen. I was here last night out by the sheets, and we had a great turnout welcoming them here to Maryland as they're making their way down to D.C. We're feeding them for free. We're helping them as much as we can because that's what America's about. It's about helping your neighbor, and this is great. This is what the country needs.
How old are you, may I ask?
15.
You're 15. There's a lot of Americans who think the way we do, who voted for Trump in 2020. And then we had January 6th take place. And they're at home, frustrated, upset, feeling hopeless because the system's rigged.
Right.
So they're not really doing anything.
Right.
What would you say to those people?
I'd say a few things. The first thing, number one, we have to clean up what happened. If we don't clean up what happened, then we don't have an election. America is about free and fair elections. But I would say we need poll watchers, poll workers, but we need people who are willing not to just go vote, but who are willing to knock on doors, wave flags. That's what we need. I would say stay in the fight, don't give up. We've got to clean up the country. Democrats aren't staying home. They're going to go out in full force. So we need to go out in full force, and we need to educate people as to what the Republican Party stands for. Faith, freedom, and family.
That's like I say, our future, you got to invest in our children, all of them. And you started it. Growing food, that's going to be a big, big thing.
Yes, it is.
And knowing what those plants and vegetables do for healing and get back to some of the basics we lost.
Right.
We lost 2 or 3 generations, so.
Yes, we have.
So
Yeah.
and that's the sad part of it. And then, but it's fixable.
That's right.
So that's what I say. I
Yeah.
have hope.
Yeah. They're kind of just sitting home. They're hopeless, not doing anything.
I've been there.
What would you
Standing
say?
on the ledge, it's just like it's all over. And even if it isn't over, my vote doesn't count. I feel the same way that, because it was kind of horse thievery that took place. And we have a long history. We don't like horse thieves, and they're stealing our vote. And so there's a lot of questions that remain. I really strongly believe that the election was stolen. Can I prove it? No. But will it ever be proven? I don't know if it will be, but there's so much evidence that points towards that. And too many people complicit with covering it up, making it go away, or can't even talk about it. So that's why it is important that you ask the question. It's important that people be able to talk about this because that's crucial to our First Amendment rights. I personally believe that the election was stolen. However, at this point, I'm proceeding on. President Biden is our president, and if I were in uniform, he'd be my commander-in-chief. Am I upset about it? Yes. Is there hope for the future? Yes. And the reason I say that is enough people are standing up and talking about it, and they're getting their confidence back to be able to talk about it as well, too. And I see good changes that are occurring. Will it be perfect? It'll never be perfect, but I do know that it can get better, and I know that there's ways that we can make this a lot more fair, a lot more transparent. And so I think that there will be good changes. I'll let you know if game over, head for the tall grass, let's everybody get out of here. But right now, I'm very confident that we can come around. But it's a hard time right now. But hold your course. Keep the faith.
That's right. Yeah. So my final question.
Yes, sir.
And I appreciate you doing this.
I appreciate you coming by.
on such short notice. do you think Maine's best days are behind her or still ahead?
No, I think we can definitely bring it back. I just don't know what to do about the southern population versus the north, because, I mean, everywhere you go is Trump, 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 but you get in southern Maine and it's, more of the same. I mean, kids can't even rent down there and work anymore. I mean, they got to get 4 or 5 of them in a house, just an apartment, just so they can live.
Still ahead of us. You gotta look. So all the sites that I used to be on, that I was a racist and all this and that, people used to hate me for liking Trump. They're like hip hop blog sites. I see them post a picture of Trump and people are like, bring Trump back. What the F? You know what I'm saying? Where's Trump at? Right. Biden's not doing nothing. Right. 2024, Trump will be the biggest thing America's ever seen. And I don't know what they're gonna do to try to counteract it. They might try to put him in prison or something. You never know. Right. They might not have locked him up before because they want to lock him up so he can't run in 2024. You never know what they're thinking, what their plans are. You can't trust them.
That's right.
So the biggest thing is you got to look. He has all the support he has right now. Most people who were Trumpers are still going to be Trumpers.
That's right.
Then everyone who was like, the F Trump was just a vote for Biden. Yeah. They're like, well, we didn't get nothing. We're not getting no stimulus money. We're not getting no help. Gas is through the roof. I mean, we're paying $5 a gallon on gas we bought years ago. Right. And it's homegrown. Right. Why are we paying more for gas that it's not just got bought yesterday? Right. This is all, inflation's through the roof, chicken wings is double the price. I mean, I'm going to fast food places and they have pieces of paper on the menu outside letting you know that like chicken tenders are double the price. Yeah. And it's like, this is crazy. So I would say in 2024, man, Big Trump is gonna have the biggest ride of his life because it's gonna be what a time to be alive, man.
People who voted for Trump in 2020 and are just discouraged, frustrated, they don't think their vote counts anymore. What would, you both can answer this, but what would you say to them? If you were sitting in their living room right now, what would you say?
Don't give up hope.
Your vote counts.
Yeah,
your vote counts. Yes, they cheated, but your vote counts.
Your vote counts.
This round's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
Actually, it's going to be a lot.
Make sure you go to the polls. Make sure you get your vote heard. Make sure you stand up for what is right for the country.
And don't be afraid to speak up.
Exactly.
Because no matter what they say, it's still the United States. We still have freedom of speech until we're told otherwise.
That's right.
And if he don't get in 2024, we're not going to have a United States. It's going to be United States of China.
Something for the last few years. We're sitting here talking today at a Save a Generation tour in Largo, Florida, with the Patrick Byrne, founder of Overstock.com. A year ago or so, you started the America Project. Are America's best days behind her or still ahead of her?
Great question. Still to be determined. I'll let you know in a year. I'll let you know if we have another crack at it. See, what's going on is I finally understand what the left was doing all my life in a way I didn't get before. Their ideas, while laudable and admirable in some ways, are so irresponsible and unsustainable that I've always wondered why didn't they understand that this would eventually crater things. Now I get it. The plan all along has been to drive things until it collapses and they take charge out of the rubble. That's the plan.
That's right.
And without our permission. So
overwhelm the system.
If we get, the Cloward Pittman. It turns out there were two professors in Columbia University in the 1960s, sociology professors, husband and wife, and that was the plan, the Cloward Pittman strategy. They're also, they were the ones who convinced.
What we're here for is we're here to protect the children and to make sure that our children grow up in what's known as a republic, a free republic. Democracy, if it backs up the republic and nothing more, and doesn't take any freedom, then it's great. And what you guys can do, listen, if you can listen to me anytime on davespaper.com, because Dave's Paper is a good friend of mine.
There's a large segment of America's voters who after the 2020 election, after January 6th, after what we've been through for the last 2 years with COVID, have just kind of just thrown their hands up, they've given up, they're hunkered down in their houses, they're not doing anything, and they think that their vote can't make a difference. What would you say to those people?
Trust the process, okay? Because I totally believe the election was stolen in 2020, okay? It's Donald Trump, I believe, is going to run in 2024. He's been campaigning in states all across this country where we had problems where people don't trust the election process. Arizona, Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Ohio. Ohio was good. But he's going to these states and he's getting candidates. He's endorsing, Donald Trump is endorsing America First candidates for governor, secretary of state, and attorney general. And these candidates they vow that they're going to fix the election process, so we have trust in the system. We have trust our vote will count. Paper ballots, no mail-in ballots, voting done with ID, results in that day, not weeks down the line. So I believe that we made mistakes in 2020. States had problems. The Democrats exploited those mistakes, stole the election, but we're going to make sure that process doesn't happen again. So just be patient and come out and support Trump because he's still drawing thousands to his rally. We have a wonderful governor, DeSantis, that I believe that's going to run after Trump. See what's happening in Florida when we have a Republican legislature that goes with the, cohesive with the governor. Lots of things are happening. Election integrity bills, back in the blue in law enforcement with bonuses, reshaping our education system, taking on big tech censorship. I mean, these are issues. If we had all the states do that, it's going to be great. This country is going to be great, and I believe that's going to happen. These Republican governors that are going to be supported by Trump, they're going to come in and going to reshape their legislature, and this country is going to blossom. And then when Trump is put back in 2024, he'll finally be able to govern without being obstructed. Especially if we take the House and the Senate, keep the Senate,
First of all, I'm from Poland. I came here in 1995, and for 27 years I'm driving the truck.
Truck driver?
Yes.
And why did you leave Poland and come to America?
Actually, I've got an opportunity to be here. Came from socialistic, communistic country to this country, beautiful country, and the main reason why I'm here is because I see where that country is going to. I experienced in my past what is going on, so we not let gonna happen, never.
There is a let's just say a percentage of Americans who, after the 2020 election and then what we watched happen at January 6th in DC, who they just kind of throw their hands up in the air, hopeless, the system's rigged, their vote doesn't matter, so they just sit home and they might type on the keyboard.
Yeah.
But
internet fighters.
Yeah,
right?
keyboard warriors. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they've kind of just given up. What would you say to those people?
Couple words. Remember, they work for us. That's it.
This is America. This is exciting stuff. Okay, we need to, let's be strong.
Yeah.
Right will win out in the long run. Only if right people continue to stand up and be against the evil that's taking place in our nation and our world.
So who are you and where are you from?
My name is Michael Mueller. I am a very small musician out of White Coast, Virginia. Well, we never know the extent of how good we can get. We've had good days in the past, but we never know what the future is going to be. So I'd say for our knowledge now, because it's the only way we can go off it, of course, they've had their best days in the past, but we never know what our extent will be in the future. So both.
So people will say to me, as was said in the introduction, that I have courage. And That's not right. That's not true. That's not the case. I have my fears in order. I am dead serious about that. So when my government, such as it is, decided in 2016 that they could introduce a piece of legislation that was unparalleled in the history of Western democracies derived from the common law tradition, and that they could require me to use a form of language that I regarded as the neologisms of detestable, what would you say? Detestable ideologues. I thought, no, I don't think so, guys. I'm a lot more afraid of losing my tongue than I am of a you. And so that's a matter of having your fears in order. Now, people always lie because people lie for two reasons. They lie because they want to avoid taking a responsibility for something that is their responsibility and perhaps encountering the requisite punishment. Children often lie for that reason, or they lie to gain something that they don't truly deserve. A lie is a form of avoidance, and so you can understand that people lie because they're afraid. They fail to tell the truth because they're afraid. So fear plays into it on that front. But what do you lose if you tell? What do you lose if you lie? What do you lose if you lie? What should you be afraid of losing if you lie? Well, the answer to that depends on how profound your conception. It depends on the profundity of your conception of freedom of speech. And this is a place, by the way, that conservatives fail dreadfully, just so you know. Free speech is not a right among other rights. It's the predicate of all rights. It's also the predicate of a functioning psyche. I mean this, I don't mean this politically, I mean it technically. It's the predicate of a functioning psyche. And it's the predicate of a society that can maintain its integrity and its adaptive flexibility simultaneously. And to say that is no different than saying that thought is the bedrock of adaptation. Now, if I can speak freely, I can express my thoughts, and so then you might think erroneously that the reason I have free speech is so that I have the freedom to express my thoughts. And that's also not why I have freedom of speech, even though that's a corollary. I have freedom of speech so that I can think. Now, the reason that works, that is a technical definition and a truth, is because it's twofold. One is, you think in words. You think by internalizing dialogue. Most people can't think. They think by talking. You think by putting forward your viewpoint and then having it opposed by someone else. And then you might say, well, why should you put up with the opposition? And the answer is, well, what if you're stupid and wrong? Well, and the right response to that is, well, I am stupid and wrong. Please correct me. And because the alternative to being corrected in that way is death. Really. So here's how it works biologically. This makes human beings unique, by the way. So animals are much the same generation to generation. And if an animal acts out a conceptualization, and the conceptualization fails dramatically, then the animal dies. And that's the end of the conceptualization. And human beings determined at some point in the past to take a slightly alternative route, or a radically alternative route. The part of our brain that we use to generate abstract thought is not a part of the brain that generates abstract factual representations of the world. So it's also not the case that you have freedom of speech so that you can discuss your facts about things in the world. That isn't how it works. What the way it works instead is that you use your capacity for abstraction to produce abstracted variants of yourself. They're abstracted variants of the next iteration of you. You might put it that way. That's what a thought is. And then you test the validity, the viability of that abstracted representation of you by subjecting it to the criticisms that are analogous to the opposition that that would meet in the real world. So the reason that you call someone out on their stupidity is so they don't run headlong into a brick wall. And that's why you discipline your children. It's like, you have to stop thinking that way. Well, why? Because you'll act that way. Well, so what? I like to act that way. It makes me happy. So that'd be the hedonistic response. Well, if you act that way, the world will object. Perhaps the natural world, perhaps the social world, and you will fail, and that will be desperately miserable, and that will be much worse than the small pain that you're going to have to undergo if you just sacrifice your stupidity now. And so, really, the progressives might say, you have no right to hurt someone's feelings, and the answer is, well, you should hurt their feelings if the alternative is to let them die. And that's what you do. That is exactly what you do if you interfere with people's ability to think. Not only do you let them die, you doom them to death because their stupid ideas don't die, and then they do. And the purpose of thinking is to let your stupid thoughts die instead of you. Now, there's a certain amount of pain associated with that because you might have put a fair bit of effort into whatever self-serving tyranny currently possesses you. And it might be very difficult for you to allow that to collapse into smoking ruins and build something out of the ashes. But that still might be easier on you than undergoing the absolute cataclysm of acting out your foolishness in the real world and having yourself burn up totally in consequence. And so there's sacrificial pain in free speech mediated error. We're all in love with our own self-serving tyrannical misapprehensions. Well, it's absolutely the case. I just did a seminar on Exodus, which I released some of it so far on YouTube with about 9 different thinkers. And one of the things that happens is in the Exodus story is that Moses calls on the Pharaoh under God's direction to abandon his tyrannical presuppositions, and Moses, or the Pharaoh, being a tyrant, doesn't abandon his tyrannical predilections. Instead, he doubles down, which is what all tyrants do, and which is what most of us do when we're confronted with error. And all that means is that things go from bad to worse, right? The plagues get more and more severe as the tyrant gets more and more intransigent until the last sacrifice is the death of the future itself. And it's the death of the future itself that you bring about when you interfere with people's ability to destroy the stupidity that would doom them to hell. And that's what you do when you interfere with free speech. It's not a mere matter of, well, people can't just say what they want, as if freedom of speech is some hedonistic whim that we're all allowed to shoot off our mouths merely to gratify our own, what would you say, again, hedonistic desires. It's not surprising that bloody left-wingers think that way, because they are perfectly willing to gratify their hedonistic desires at everyone else's expense at any moment in their entire lives. And so the fact that they'll extend precisely the same logic to the hypothetical hedonism of free speech is absolutely in keeping with the mode of being that they've adopted in the most radical possible manner. But that doesn't mean it's correct. It just means they don't understand the relationship between freedom of speech and thought and adaptation itself. This isn't some theory, by the way. It's no more a theory than it is to say that it's a theory that thought is useful. You try things out by thinking, and you have to do that. You have to do that with great difficulty. That you want clashes of avatars so that the best survive, right? You want that for your children. You want to put up some resistance against their foolishness so that they modify themselves at the least possible cost. You do the same thing with your wife or your husband. If you have any sense at all in your marriage, you communicate honestly, painful and terrible as that is, so that each of you can discover what's lacking about you, and that's plenty. And so it's not going to be a pleasant interaction. You know, it's going to be something that burns off the dead wood, and you might be mostly dead wood, and so you're going to object to that. So.
Say two things about the present moment, because I think about them all the time, and I brood on this constantly. But here are two conclusions I've come to, which I think are slightly less depressing than the most obvious, which is the country's really going at high speed in the wrong direction. Yeah, no kidding. Like in ways that are just unfathomable. But for those of us who are still engaged in trying to figure out what this means and not just repelled by it, I would say two things that I think worth thinking about. The first is you look around and you see so many people break under the strain, under the downward pressure of whatever this is that we're going through. And you look with disdain and sadness as you see people you know become Quislings, you see them revealed as cowards, you see them going along with a new thing, which is clearly a poisonous thing, a silly thing, you know, saying things you know they don't believe because they want to keep their jobs. If there's a single person in this room who hasn't seen that through George Floyd and COVID and the Ukraine war, raise your hand. Oh, nobody? Right, you all know what I'm talking about. And you're so disappointed in people. You know you are, and you realize that the herd instinct is maybe the strongest instinct. I mean, it may be stronger than the hunger and sex instincts, actually. The instinct, I'm not mad at people, I'm just sad, I'm disappointed. How could you go along with this? You know it's not true, but you're saying it anyway? Really, you're putting your pronouns in your email? You're ridiculous. You know, but no one else thinks it's ridiculous. Oh no, it's the pronouns in the email. What does that even mean? What does it even mean? You're saying things you can't define. LBGTQIA+? Who's the plus? The plus is invited to my show anytime. Find a plus and I'll interview him. What's it like to be a plus? Am I a plus? I'm serious. I feel like I'm an addition. Does that make me a plus? No one even knows what it is. And the whole society, LGBTQIA+. All right, what's the plus? Oh, shut up, racist. Okay. Back to my point. So you see the sadness happening. But there is, as there always is, this is a fact of nature and theology and of observable reality, there is a countervailing force at work always. There's a counterbalance to the badness. It's called goodness. And you see it in people. So for every 10 people who are putting he and him in their electronic JP Morgan email signatures, there's one person who's like, no, I'm not doing that. Sorry, I don't want to fight, but like, I'm not doing that. It's a betrayal of what I think is true. It's a betrayal of my conscience, of my faith, of my sense of myself, of my dignity as a human being, of my autonomy. I am not a slave. I am a free citizen, and I'm not doing that. And there's nothing you can do to me to make me do it. And I hope it won't come to that. But if it does come to that, here I am. Here I am. It's Paul on trial. Here I am. And you see that in people, and it's a completely unexpected assortment of people. I'm really interested in cause and effect, and as I noted at the outset of my remarks and my ability to predict the future, working on that. But because I'm sort of paid to predict things, I try and think a lot about, you know, what connects certain outcomes that I should have seen before they occurred. And in this case, there is no thread that I can find that connects all of the people who've popped up in my life to be that lone brave person in the crowd who says, no, thank you. You could not have known who these people are. They don't fit a common profile. Some are people like me. Some of them don't look like me at all. Some of them are people I despised on political grounds just a few years ago. I could name their names, but you may not even know about their transformations, and I don't want to wreck your dinner by telling you who they are. But there's in one case someone who I made fun of on television, and certainly in my private life in vulgar ways, who was really the embodiment of everything I found repulsive, who in the middle of COVID decided, no, I'm not going along with this. And once you say one true thing and stick with it, all kinds of other true things occur to you. The truth is contagious. Lying is, but the truth is as well. And the second you decide to tell the truth about something, you are filled with this, I don't want to get supernatural on you, but you are filled with this power from somewhere else. Try it. Tell the truth about something. You feel it every day. The more you tell the truth, the stronger you become. That's completely real. It's measurable in the way that you feel. And of course, the opposite is also true. The more you lie, the weaker and more terrified you become. We all know that feeling. You lie about something and all of a sudden you're a prisoner of that lie. You are diminished by it. You are weak and afraid. But you look around and you see these people, and some of them really have paid a heavy price for telling the truth. And they are cast out of their groups, whatever those groups are, but they do it anyway. And I look on at those people with the deepest possible admiration. I am paid to do that. I face no penalty. Someone came up to me, you're so brave. Really? I'm a talk show host. It's like I can have any opinion I want. That's my job. That's why they pay me. It's not brave to tell the truth on a cable news show. And if you're not doing that, you're really an idiot. You're really craven. You're lying on television. Why would you do that? You're literally making a living to say what you think, and you can't even do that? Please. Which is that it might be time to start to reassess the terms we use to describe what we're watching. So when I started at Heritage, the presumption was, and this is a very Anglo-American assumption, that the debates we're having are kind of rational debates about the way to get to mutually agreed upon outcomes, right? So like we all want the country to be more prosperous and free and people to be less oppressed or whatever. And so we're gonna argue about tax rates, and I think higher tax gets us there. I'm a Keynesian and you disagree, you're an Austrian or whatever. But the objective is the same. And so we write our papers and they write their papers, and may the best papers win. I don't think that's what we're watching now at all. I don't think we're watching a debate over how to get to the best outcome. I think that's completely wrong. And I've come to this conclusion, and I should say at the outset, I'm an Episcopalian, so don't take any theological advice from me, because I don't have any. I grew up in the shallowest faith tradition that's ever been invented. It's not even a Christian religion at this point. I say with shame. But I'm just saying this as an observer of what's going on. There is no way to assess, say, the transgenderist movement with that mindset. Policy papers don't account for it at all. If you have people who are saying, I have an idea, let's castrate the next generation. Let's sexually mutilate children. I'm sorry, that's not a political debate. What? There's nothing to do with politics. What's the outcome we're desiring here? An androgynous population? Is that really what are we arguing for that? I don't think anyone could defend that as a positive outcome. But the weight of the government and a lot of corporate interests are behind that. Well, what is that? Well, it's irrational. If you say, well, I think abortion is always bad. Well, I think sometimes it's necessary. That's a debate I'm familiar with. But if you're telling me that abortion is a positive good, what are you saying? Well, you're arguing for child sacrifice, obviously. It's not about a teen girl gets pregnant and what do we do about that and victims of rape. I get it. Of course I understand that, and I have compassion for everyone involved. But when the Treasury Secretary stands up and says, you know what you can do to help the economy? Get an abortion. Well, that's like an Aztec principle, actually. There's not a society in history that didn't practice human sacrifice. Not one. I checked. Even the Scandinavians, I'm ashamed to say. It wasn't just the Mesoamericans, it was everybody. So that's what that is. Well, what's the point of child sacrifice? Well, there's no policy goal entwined with that. No, that's a theological phenomenon. And that's kind of the point I'm making. None of this makes sense in conventional political terms. When people or crowds of people, or the largest crowd of people at all, which is the federal government, the largest human organization in human history, decide that the goal is to destroy things, destruction for its own sake. Hey, let's tear it down. What you're watching is not a political movement, it's evil. So if you want to assess, and I'll put it in I'll stop with this. I'll put it in non-political, non-specific theological terms, and just say, if you want to know what's evil and what's good, what are the characteristics of those? And by the way, I think the Athenians would have agreed with this. This is not necessarily just a Christian notion. This is kind of I would say, widely agreed upon understanding of good and evil. What are its products? What do these two conditions produce? Well, good is characterized by order, calmness, tranquility, peace, whatever you want to call it, lack of conflict, cleanliness. Cleanliness is next to godliness. It's true, it is. And evil is characterized by their opposites: violence, hate, disorder, division, disorganization, and filth. So if you are all in on the things that produce the latter basket of outcomes, what you're really advocating for is evil. That's just true. I'm not calling for a religious war, far from it. I'm merely calling for an acknowledgement of what we're watching, which is not one, and I'm certainly not backing the Republican Party. I'm not making a partisan point at all. I'm just noting what's super obvious. Like, those of us who are in our mid-50s are caught in the past in the way that we think about this. One side's like, no, I've got this idea, and we've got this idea, and let's have a debate about our ideas. They don't want a debate. Those ideas won't produce outcomes that any rational person would want under any circumstances. Those are manifestations of some larger force acting upon us. It's just so obvious. It's completely obvious. And I think two things. One, we should say that and stop engaging in these totally fraudulent debates where we are using the terms that we used in 1991 when I started at Heritage, as if maybe, I could just win the debate if I marshaled more facts. I've tried that, doesn't work. And two, maybe we should all take just like 10 minutes a day to say a prayer about it. I'm serious. Like, why not? And I'm saying that to you, not as some kind of evangelist. I'm literally saying that to you as an Episcopalian. The Samaritans of our time. I'm coming to you from the most humble and lowly theological position you can. I'm literally an Episcopalian, okay? And even I have concluded it might be worth taking just 10 minutes out of your busy schedule to say a prayer for the future, and I hope you will.
The reality of God became so real. And you think about that, how did they remain faithful in such a scary time? You know what is just incredible to think about? How they stayed faithful. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel were sons from people living in a generation under the reign of a 26-year-old king named Josiah, who rediscovered the lost word of God and allowed it to change everything about their life, and made a covenant to God that in this generation, we're going to be faithful to you as the one true God. We're going to follow these commands, heart and soul. And there was a man named Hilkiah who discovered that law, that had a son named Jeremiah, who was a prophet. So you think about Jeremiah, you think about Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These are kids from a generation who made a promise to God that the story would not be lost on them, that they were going to follow it heart and soul. And so even though things got bad for them, they remained faithful because they saw parents who knew the story, believed the story, and the story changed them. So do I worry about the days that we're in, the things that are come for my kids? Well, yeah. There's a lot of bad things happening. It's definitely scary. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, heart and soul. And this story, it will not be lost on my watch. Don't let it be lost on yours. Don't let it be lost on your family. Don't let it be lost on this generation. When everyone turns to other gods, and they are, you know the one true God. Stay steadfast. Take heart. Know the story. Pass it on.
The biggest hand at the convention so far, none of the political speakers, but John Wayne, the actor, Mr. Green Beret himself, and there he is up before the Republican convention.
Fellow wouldn't want more than that said over him if they were about to bury him, which I hope will be hard to do to me. Took me a long time to decide to stand up here, political convention, because I'm about as political as a Bengal tiger. I'm here because I think this is the party that cares. Good old American expression, I think this is the party that gives a damn. I have a feeling that a nation is more than just government, laws and rules. It's an attitude. It's a people's outlook. Dean Martin once asked me what I wanted from my baby daughter. And I realize now that my answer was a kind of a attitude toward my country. Well, he asked me this on election day, and the bars were closed anyway, so he had a lot of time to listen, and I told him. He asked me to repeat it on his program, which I did. I've been asked to repeat it here. I told him that I wanted for my daughter Marisa what most parents want for their children. I wanted to stick around long enough to see that she got a good start. I'd like to have her know some of the values that we knew as kids, some of the values that an articulate few now are saying are old-fashioned. But most of all, I want her to be grateful, as I am grateful for every day of my life that I spent in the United States of America. I know this may sound corny, but the first thing she's going to learn from me is the Lord's Prayer and some of the Psalms. I don't care whether she ever memorizes the Gettysburg Address or not, but I want her to understand it. And since very few little girls are asked to defend their country, she'll probably never have to raise her hand to that oath. But I want her to respect all who do. I guess that's what I want for my girl. That's what I want for my country. And that's what I want for the men that you people are going to pick from here to go shape our destinies. Thank you very much.
More than the government takes in. We haven't balanced our budget 28 out of the last 34 years. We've raised our debt limit 3 times in the last 12 months. And now our national debt is 1.5 times bigger than all the combined debts of all the nations of the world. We have $15 billion in gold in our treasury. We don't own an ounce. Foreign dollar claims are $27.3 billion. And we've just had announced that the dollar of 1939 will now purchase 45 cents in its total value. As for the peace that we would preserve, I wonder who among us would like to approach the wife or mother whose husband or son has died in South Vietnam and ask them if they think this is a peace that should be maintained indefinitely. Do they mean peace, or do they mean we just want to be left in peace? There can be no real peace while one American is dying someplace in the world for the rest of us. We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars. And it's been said if we lose that war, and in so doing lose this way of freedom of ours, history will record with the greatest astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening. Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. Not too long ago, two friends of mine were talking to a Cuban refugee, a businessman who had escaped from Castro. And in the midst of his story, one of my friends turned to the other and said, "We don't know how lucky we are." And the Cuban stopped and said, "How lucky you are. I had some place to escape to." And in that sentence, he told us the entire story. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. This is the issue of this election. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves. You and I are told increasingly we have to choose between a left or right. Well, I'd like to suggest there is no such thing as a left or right. There's only an up or down. Man's old age dream, the ultimate in individual freedom consistent with law and order, or down to the ant-heap of totalitarianism. And regardless of their sincerity, their humanitarian motives, those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. If nothing in life is worth dying for, when did this begin? Just in the face of this enemy? Or should Moses have told the children of Israel to live in slavery under the Pharaohs? Should Christ have refused the cross? Should the patriots at Concord Bridge have thrown down their guns and refused to fire the shot heard round the world? The martyrs of history were not fools. And our honored dead, who gave their lives to stop the advance of the Nazis, didn't die in vain. Where then is the road to peace? Well, it's a simple answer after all. You and I have the courage to say to our enemies, there is a price we will not pay. There is a point beyond which they must not advance. You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.